Hello.
There.
Happy day after Memorial Day 2023.
Yeah, same to you.
Yes, yes. Thank you for joining me today, Margaret. Okay, couple housekeeping items for those of you that are listening live. This is our typical Tuesday talk. We love audience participation. So near the bottom of your Zoom screen, or maybe it's at the top of your Zoom screen, however you have it set up, there's a Q&A button. We love audience participation. So if you have a question, be sure to type in the question and we will make sure that it gets asked and answered over the course of the next 30 minutes. Pretty simple. And if you've done this before, it's the same thing as last time. So anyway, I'm Jen Chaney, Vice President of Franchise Development for Right at Home. Margaret, would you mind introducing yourself?
Margaret Haynes, CEO and President of Right at Home.
Okay, perfect. So Here we are yet again. I have written down a few questions in advance. I actually just hung up on a phone call with a potential Right at Home owner, and he asked some really fantastic questions that I might just be selfish and take advantage of the time I have with you now to ask you those questions. But
Sure.
Anyway, why don't we just start with just a general, can you believe it's almost June? Kind of just a general kind of state of the union. How has the year gone so far now that it's nearly halfway over? I can't even believe that I'm saying that.
Yeah, it is hard to believe that it's literally almost halfway over. But yeah, Right at Home as an entire network, we have had a great start to 2023. So, when I look across the entire network, also including our company-owned locations that we have, everyone is recording higher performance than the prior year. So when we look at Q1 of 2023 over Q1 of 2024, the system as a whole has grown in a very positive way. So we're seeing, there's still this always looking for more candidates in terms of applicants to be caregivers. And, that's something that we talk about as a network on a regular basis of saying, we are seeing more applicants come in. So that's starting. We're seeing more people come into the job market, which is a wonderful thing. But we also recognize as a network that this issue of the demand outweighing the supply of the caregivers to provide the support to those clients that are needing assistance is a math problem that we're going to be working on for 20 some years, just based upon the demographics of the country itself. And actually the world, quite frankly, because we're seeing the same thing in our international locations that we have across the globe. But to me, that's just a problem that we continue to work. But the fact that we're continuing to see growth in hours and a nice build back after, a couple of years that have been pandemic years that have certainly presented different challenges along the way, the system has really come through that very strongly and on a really high growth trajectory now, knowing that we're just on the cusp, right, of this boom of individuals that are going to be needing our services and have the opportunity to take advantage of our services, which is why I'm just really excited about the future that's in front of us as a brand and as a network.
Yes. And this, we have a question that came in. It's like this person was reading my mind because I was going to ask you this question, whether this person asked it or not, but I'll just read it word for word. What do you believe is contributing to this growth?
Well, a lot of things, I would say. And it depends on how you define growth. So the increase in hours is all, I think, driven by the pandemic itself highlighted the value that home care can provide and the value of someone being able to age gracefully in their home versus having to be in an institutional type setting, right? Because they had access to their loved ones if they were in their home versus sometimes they didn't have access to it during the pandemic. So I think the pandemic itself, one of the positives was that it really elevated our industry and the important role that we play in the entire healthcare ecosystem. So I think that's part of it. I think the growth is also tied to more people coming back into the workforce just with the economy and some of the entitlement initiatives that were part of the pandemic timeframe. Those are going away. And so it's pushing workers back into the workplace saying, okay, I need to rejoin the workforce. I think that's a good thing. We've also seen, this year already from a development perspective in terms of planting new flags and in opening locations in areas that we weren't before. The team has a set goal, and 3 months in was already halfway to that goal. And I think that success speaks not only to just the overall brand reputation that's out there, but also a desire with, people looking at the economy and saying, you know what, I'm tired of working for someone else. I want to be my own boss. I want to, create my own kind of legacy. But I want to do that in a way that I can own my own business, but not be in business by myself. So doing that in a way through a franchise network that allows you to benefit from the proven best practices and policies and procedures and those that have gone before you and been able to build sustainable, profitable businesses. And I think that's, certainly when you get into business, obviously you want to get into business in order to build something that's going to be sustainable and profitable. And that's what we're really focused on. So I think it's a multitude of things.
Okay, great. Okay, so this is a question that I was just asked this question. I've been asked this question before, and I know our development directors have also gotten this question. So I'm going to take this information as coming directly from our FDD, so it's no secret. But I would love for you to take a moment to really explain what the relationship is between IMC and Risemark / Right at Home. I think private equity firms can sometimes, I don't know if I want to use the word scare, but just people are hesitant, like, oh my goodness, Right at Home is owned by private equity. And I've heard that private equity firms, they come in and they do X, Y, and Z. So if you could just take a moment to explain what that relationship looks like between IMC and, Risemark Right at Home, really just to kind of somebody who's listening to this can get a really firm understanding on the great partnership that we do have. And it truly is a partnership. And what do strategy planning sessions look like? And it's not, IMC says do this and we do it. That's definitely not the way I try to explain it, but I would love to hear it directly from you.
Yeah, I would be more than happy to. So I'm going to start from the base and then build up to IMC. So when we think about Right at Home, so we have a Risemark that I think of it as it's the holding company in which Right at Home, the franchise network, plugs into. That's Right at Home LLC. We also have Right at Home International, which is our master licensees across the countries, the other 6 countries that we're in. That plugs into Risemark. So I think of Risemark as this power strip. That's kind of why I'm pointing like this.
Yep.
Then we also have our Right at Home company-owned locations. So they are under, sometimes you might hear us say ROCO, and that just means Right at Home company-owned. And so we have all of our 9 locations there that plug into this power strip as well. So that is plugged into Risemark. And then Risemark is owned by IMC, or Investors Management Corporation. They actually purchased us back in 2016. And while they are a private company and they have a lot of equity, they're not private equity in the sense that they really follow the business philosophy that many are probably familiar with around Warren Buffett, right? Where Warren Buffett has built his Berkshire company around buying really good companies that have good management in place and then just letting them run. And that's really the philosophy that IMC follows with all the companies that they owned. And that's what, they were advertised as when the decision was made to sell Risemark to IMC back in 2016. And I will tell you, Jen, just as you mentioned, they are such great partners. So they think about 100-year plans. They think about legacy building, not like a typical private equity, like maybe a KKR. Again, not to disparage them, but they will come in and a general private equity is looking to say, how can we wring out as much profitability and do a turn on this business within maybe 3 to 5 years to get the benefit out of buying it, wringing out the profitability, and then selling it again for something obviously higher than what they bought it for. That is not IMC at all. And when you look at their brands that they have, their flagship brand that started IMC is Golden Corral. and they've celebrated 50 years in business. So we're talking about really long, strong businesses with great longevity, as well as a great runway in front of them from a strategy perspective. And to your point, when we do strategic planning, IMC wants to know what we see as a network and as an industry and where we want to go. And we update them on it, but they don't drive that because they recognize they're not in the day-to-day trenches. They're not experts in the industry like the Right at Home network is. And so they are banking on us as a corporation and as a network to tell them where we need to go based on what's going on with the industry and how we need to grow. And they're there to support us along the way. So it really is I can't say anything negative about it because it's been wonderful because we've also learned a lot from them as a leadership team. I've learned a lot from their experience and vice versa. They've learned a lot from us. And so it really is a very symbiotic and supportive relationship that allows us to grow in the way in which we need to.
Okay. Got it. All right. So getting down a little bit more into the strategy. So we as a Right at Home team put together the strategy. So how is that communicated to IMC and what kind of feedback do they give? You know, you said it and I said it too. This is a partnership that we have with them. So what is like the strategy planning and the execution and, you know, meeting those expectations? Does IMC say like, all right, we want you to grow the business by X% year over year, or just try to get in your brain about what the strategies planning sessions look like with IMC and how we present that to them and how we show them, you know, how we're executing the strategy. In my mind, that made total sense. Hopefully that makes sense to you as well. You know what I'm trying to say, right?
I'll start responding and then you can tell me.
Okay.
But, you know, strategy is certainly a key element, right? As a brand and as a network, we want to have a strategic plan. Where are we headed? And so we actually think about strategy in a 3-year kind of rolling framework. So last summer, and we do a lot of our strategic planning in the summertime, and then that feeds then our budgeting process. And from our budgeting process, then we present our budget to IMC as our parent company to say, all right, here's what we need in order to support the growth that we're looking for coming this next year. And we forecast out what the growth looks like, all of that. So we haven't yet gone into, we're getting ready to gear up for our planning session this year. But last year we put together our 3-year strategic plan, and that encompassed input from a lot of different audiences, right? So not only is the corporate team thinking about everything we've learned, we hear through the network, where do we see when we are engaged with the industry as a whole, because we're involved in industry associations that keep our finger on the pulse on an industry perspective. But we also engage with the franchise network, right? So we did what we called listening sessions with the franchise network to understand what are they hearing in their local market. And I don't want it to make it sound like that's a once a year kind of thing, because we're constantly engaging with the franchise network to get feedback and understand what's going on the market, what's happening from a regulation perspective, what are things that we can continue to do to support the entire network. But we obviously had that specific event that we brought all that feedback together. And we also worked with the Strategic Leadership Council, which is a subset of the franchise network, but it's a group that's elected by the franchise network that engages with us at the corporate office on a monthly basis in order to, again, make sure we've got good lines of communication open. Because at the end of the day, we are really focused on a very cohesive environment between us at the corporate office and our franchisees, because we learn so much from them. Also, our company owns allow us to walk in the same shoes. And so we use that as well to, get feedback. But from that, then we create a budget, right? So based on where we need to go and what we need to invest, we create a budget and present that to IMC and ultimately to our board. And then in our quarterly board meetings, we're providing updates of how are we performing against the objectives that we set, the strategy that we're executing on, where maybe we need additional assistance. Maybe there's things that haven't gone exactly how we thought, which is typical. With any kind of strategic plan, when you're thinking 3 years out, it's going to be a direct line of how you get there. But then we seek the insights and advice from IMC and our board of directors. But at the end of the day, they still let us run and make those decisions. And a really great example, and then I'll stop talking here, but a really great example of the partnership is this last year, coming into 2023, we presented a budget and a strategic plan that said we need to do some investing this year. So we actually want to go a little bit backwards to go forwards when we think about the corporate overall profitability, recognizing that we wanted to carve off some resources, for example, around innovation around the business model and innovation around technology, just looking at the changing dynamics of the industry. And some people would think, gosh, your parent company isn't going to allow you to go backwards to go forwards. And that was the easiest conversation that, I've had with them in the sense that they were completely supportive of us doing what's the right thing for the overall network and the brand. And that's the thing that I love about it. So hopefully that helps explain a little bit about how we get to strategy and how they support it.
Yes, it certainly does. I have a couple of clarifying questions. I know the answers to, but I'm sure our listeners are wondering.
Sure.
So you mentioned IMC, and then you've also mentioned the board. So what do you mean by the board? What's the difference between IMC and the board?
Yeah. So IMC is our parent company that owns Risemark. And then as part of our parent company, though, we have a governing board made up of individuals that we've asked to sit on our board to just be advisors to us and help us with the growth of the company. So there are members from IMC that participate on our board, but then we have a chairman of our board that's not a member of IMC, but actually, leads our board. And then we have other experts from different walks of life that engage with us on a quarterly basis just to help guide us, similar to what other, companies would have from a board of directors perspective.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
You also mentioned the SLC, and there's two questions on here that I'm going to kind of group together.
Okay.
This one says, do you work with franchisees in getting their opinions on direction? Second one says, how do franchisees provide feedback to corporate? So I'm going to loop those two together in conjunction with you did mention the SLC. So just explaining what the SLC is and how that kind of encompasses the feedback that we get from our franchise system and how we use it and how we incorporate their feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. So the SLC stands for the Strategic Leadership Council. And for those that maybe are familiar with franchising in general, you might have heard it referred to as a FAC or a Franchise Advisory Council. Same concept. We just call it the Strategic Leadership Council because the council not only helps us with strategy, but they also help with our brand fund. So the national advertising and the things that we're doing collectively as a network, they help make those decisions around where we need to use those funds to create the greatest impact for the entire network. But that FAC, so there's 8 positions that are elected in because we take the US and we break it up into 8 regions. So each region will vote who they want to be their representative. And of course, the representatives raise their hand and say they're interested in running. So it's not just like a random, you get picked and you have no desire to serve on the council. But it's so they get elected. And then there's also 4 appointed positions that help us balance out what got elected. Then the council itself will appoint 4 other individuals to help balance out the dynamics, because we want to make sure always that SLC is a good representation of the entire network. So talking about how long someone's been in the system, different sizes of their businesses, those sorts of things, and from a geography perspective.
Yep.
But then we use input from the system in so many different ways, and we have so many channels of ways in which the franchisees can provide feedback to the corporate office. So certainly they can use the Strategic Leadership Council, and their council representative is reaching out on a regular basis, not only providing updates, but also soliciting feedback. But we also have regular town halls. We call them Takeoff Tuesdays, where we are engaging with the franchise network. Many times there's franchisees sitting on panels within that, sharing information. We also have performance groups. So these are small groups of franchisees that come together and kind of act like a board of directors to each other, similar to what we were talking about, that help them think about their business. That's facilitated by someone at the corporate office. And that too is a great avenue to get a lot of feedback. But also every franchise owner in the network has a business performance coach, someone that is engaging with them on a regular basis. And that too is a great conduit to get input. And then we do kind of a global surveying of the network on an annual basis as well, to hit on maybe some other areas that aren't common, day-to-day operation things, but things that are really important for us to hear and understand, so we can continue to collectively meet the goals and objectives and continue to touch lives in a meaningful way.
Okay, thank you for that. This is an SLC related question. It says, what are the benefits? Okay, I'm going to read it word for word. Okay. What are the benefits does the SLC member receive, or why would you want to be an SLC member? So okay. I think maybe there's a typo there. So really just looking for, why would somebody want to be on the SLC?
Yeah.
So what on earth would somebody want to do that, Margaret?
Why in the world? So actually, if you have anytime you have the opportunity to engage with someone that has sat on that council, I think what they will tell you is it really helped them give back to a network that has given them so much. Yep. So, they see it as an opportunity to help influence strategy, to be more involved in the network, because we know that when we look across the franchise owners in the network, those that are engaged and actually putting time and energy into helping their fellow franchisees and helping the network as a whole grow, do much better and outperform those that come into the network and then for whatever reason decide, hey, I really want to be in business on my own, and I'll call you and I need you, and kind of disconnect. So I think part of it is just the connection there. Certainly in terms of when we meet, and some of our meetings are face-to-face and some of them are through Zoom meetings. But the face-to-face ones, we certainly pay for the airline to get them wherever we're having the meeting, and their hotel and all of their expenses, though. So all the T&E stuff, we certainly cover that because we really appreciate the time that they are committing to helping the overall network be more successful. But I think it really comes from a place that franchisee recognizing that by giving back, they actually get a lot more from it. And that's why they choose to run for the SLC and sit on it as a member of it. Great.
Okay. Thank you, Margaret.
Yeah.
Let's see here. We've got 3 more questions, a little over 5 minutes left. And these are great questions. I'll just start with the top one here. How nimble is the organization to adjust if the strategy changes?
Really great question. So with strategy and looking 3 years out, as I mentioned, what we think will be 3 years from now, and when we look in hindsight, we'll see that it was kind of a curvy road to get there, because nothing is as straight as possible. So we have to be able to be nimble and adjust to changing elements. With that said, a franchise network can sometimes be difficult if we have to make a big shift in strategy, simply because it's made up of independently owned and operated companies, right? So we have to win the hearts and minds. We talk about what we can control versus influence. And on the franchising side, there's a lot of influencing that we focus on, using the Strategic Leadership Council to say, okay, if we need to make a shift, the business sense should sell the concept itself. The reason we have our company owns is because recognizing that the industry is moving very fast, and it's not going to move any slower than it does today, meaning that it's continuing to get faster and faster. And recognizing that a couple of years ago, back in 2019, we specifically said we wanted to get into company owned, because that allows us to test out. So we use them as test kitchens, test out some things that may be a strategy shift or a new line of business. We can do that with the locations that we control, find out, does it work? If it works, then we can bring it to the entire network, and that helps the network shift in the same way, because it's a proven concept versus saying, hey, I know you need to put food on the table, but we want you to try this thing over here. We have no idea if it's going to work, but just try it. And if it doesn't, oh well, no harm, no foul. That doesn't seem quite fair. So I think from a strategy perspective as well, that's why company owned is such a critical aspect of it.
Okay, got it. And I did, for the listener who typed this question, I do believe Margaret just answered it for you. So I'll read it to you, Margaret, but I'm pretty sure that you captured an answer. Right at home company owned locations were mentioned. Do franchisees interact with those locations, and do they function similarly to franchise locations?
Yeah, so the answer is yes and yes. So they do function similarly to franchise locations. They pay royalties just like a franchisee does. They contribute to the brand fund just like a franchisee does. But also, we are constantly sharing best practices. So with things that we're trying out, once we know that they're working, we will bring that to the network, and vice versa. We're learning things from the network that maybe we want to try within the company owns. So there's very much an open communication. And actually the gentleman that leads our company owned initiative is an individual that several years ago was actually a franchise owner in the network. And so it's been wonderful to have him be able to help us grow and continue to build out our company-owned locations. But yes, we follow we have to follow the same policies and procedures and licensure and all of that.
Yes. Okay, with just a little under a few minutes left, the two questions, and I'm going to kind of combine them into one question.
Okay.
So it has to do with technology. You mentioned technology. What kinds of technology exists in our space? And secondary to that, what was the last successful innovation introduced to a company-owned store that was rolled out to the franchise system?
Yeah. Okay. So on the technology side, like, what technology is out there? And I will tell you, there is a plethora of technology. There is so much out there right now that the team is really focused on weeding through all of that and determining what elements might be good value add in conjunction with actually putting a caregiver in the home. So we're thinking about some bundling kind of elements that would make sense. So we're actually starting to test some of that. And I don't want to give the impression that all the testing just happens in the company owns and not with the franchise network, because that's not true. There are franchise owners across our network that are very entrepreneurially minded, very innovative in the way in which they approach. And so we collaborate with them. So many times if we're testing something in a company owned, we're also testing it with some of our franchise locations together and then bringing that forward. A great example of one that we were testing together is an applicant tracking system. So we identified we needed to do that, started using it both in some franchise and some company owns, and have now brought it to the entire network. And it's been adopted quite beautifully, I should say, in the sense that it really has created a better experience for the applicant, recognizing that caregivers we need more caregivers. How can we make that process really easy for them to engage right out of the gate and feel connected to the Right at Home brand from the minute they apply to a position? And so that's just one example of using operational technology in order to really elevate the performance for all across the board.
Okay, got it. 1 minute to spare. Margaret, is there anything that you want to say to our listeners that we haven't addressed already? Final thoughts.
Final thoughts. So just a thank you for those that have participated in these sessions, or even if this is your first session. I know that trying to decide if you want to buy into a franchise and actually get into home care can be a really daunting kind of decision, but just know that if it is the right decision for you, we're here to help you through that process. And our goal at the end of the day, and what we get up and think about every day, is how can we help those in our network build sustainable, profitable businesses. And it's a great industry and something that I love getting up and coming to work every day, and would want that for anybody that's interested or thinking about joining the Right at Home network.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much, Margaret. I appreciate you taking the time to do these phone calls. And I know that our listeners do as well. They really, truly take advantage of watching these and participating in these. It's very helpful with their due diligence as they're trying to decide if they want to join the Right at Home system or not. So thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Okay. Have a great day. And thanks, everyone.
Yep. Thank you.